Mark, weighing 325 pounds, and Sarah, who had experienced the loss of friends due to heart attacks, were deeply concerned about Mark's health. As a result, Sarah made the difficult decision to limit their intimate encounters to only 4 times a year, tying them to Mark's weight loss goals. This included Valentine's Day, their anniversary, and both of their birthdays. Over the course of 2 years, Mark managed to shed a significant amount of weight, reaching around 207 pounds. However, after losing 118 pounds, he began contemplating giving up on his weight loss journey. The road had been grueling, and Mark felt exhausted. When Mark expressed his desire to quit, Sarah adamantly refused to let him. This is the moment that sparked the inspiration for the story. In a bold move, Sarah issued a threatening ultimatum. If Mark were to quit, he would only receive intimacy 4 times a year. This dire consequence forced Sarah to look elsewhere to fulfill her needs. The foundation of their marriage trembled under the weight of Sarah's threat. Mark's head snapped up, displaying shock and confusion in his eyes. The sadness and hurt he felt from her words caused the foundation of their marriage to crack. As his emotions shifted from sadness to anger and disgust, the marriage's foundation crumbled even further. Sarah realized in that moment that she had made a grave mistake. Sarah had pushed her beloved companion to his limits, all for the sake of her desires for his weight loss. Then she had further threatened him with infidelity as punishment. She questioned her own actions, realizing the profound impact they had on Mark. Expressing his frustration, Mark emphasized the tremendous effort he had put into losing over 100 pounds for Sarah's sake. He accused her of using intimacy as a tool to manipulate him, expressing disappointment at her reward of continued deprivation and the potential for infidelity. Mark believed that Sarah had jeopardized their marriage by introducing chaos into their home. He doubted her trustworthiness and speculated about her thoughts of betrayal throughout their 2-year journey. In conclusion, Mark felt that Sarah had demolished their marriage, leaving him unsure about what to believe. Sarah expressed deep regret, insisting that she never intended to engage in infidelity. Despite her pleas, Mark questioned the credibility of her words with a look of disgust. He conveyed the seriousness of the situation, then left the kitchen table and headed into the garage to contemplate further. Sarah was left in tears, fully understanding the gravity of the situation. She sobbed, acknowledging the seed of doubt that had been planted in Mark's mind and realizing the challenge of dispelling it. Reflecting on her actions, Sarah admitted her lack of consideration for Mark's feelings. She recognized her own greed and desire for more, despite Mark's previous efforts. Now she understood the need to regain what she had lost. After spending approximately an hour in the garage, engaging in activities to occupy his hands while contemplating the complexities of their situation, Mark came to a realization. He wasn't entirely convinced that his wife had cheated on him over the past 2 years, but he couldn't be sure anymore. Her earlier comment had cast doubt in his mind. Furthermore, he couldn't predict if she would do so in the future. He uttered, "I need to find out." With a heavy heart, Mark returned to the house. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, visibly distressed, her eyes red and her nose runny from recent tears. Mark observed her condition and felt a twinge of regret, but he remained resolute in his decision. He communicated to Sarah his choice to abandon the diet, informing her that their intimate moments would now be restricted to the agreed-upon 4 times a year or possibly none at all. The choice was left to her discretion. Mark warned of severe consequences should she engage in relations with someone else, expressing his intent to inflict physical harm on her hypothetical lover. With sternness in his voice, Mark addressed Sarah, asserting that any infidelity on her part would result in an immediate end to their relationship. He made it clear that he would not tolerate being married to a cheater, labeling her as an unfaithful woman and expressing his lack of tolerance for such behavior. He declared his mistrust and announced his intention to closely monitor her actions, cautioning her to be exceedingly careful. As he concluded his message, Mark mentioned his temporary departure, informing Sarah that he would be absent during lunch but present for dinner. He offered the option of ordering food if she didn't feel like cooking, leaving the atmosphere charged with tension and uncertainty. Mark grabbed his car keys off the counter and walked out of the back door into the garage. A few moments later, Sarah heard the garage door open and Mark's car leave. Sarah said loudly, "Oh my God, I can't believe this. How could I be so stupid?" She started crying again and just sat there, wishing she would keep quiet. After an hour or two, she got up to go to the bathroom, then lay down on the bed and cried again. When Mark returned home late in the evening, he found her in exactly the same position, Like many husbands who suspect their wives of cheating, Mark decided to conduct his own investigation. He thought that the easiest way to start would be to drive to the office of the telephone providers and request a statement on the calls of his wife's home phone and mobile phone. Both phones were in his name, so he was sure he wouldn't have any problems getting reports. The company providing wired phone services told him that he could get a statement electronically, and they would be able to download the call data for the last 3 years onto a CD for a small fee. He gladly paid and left the office with everything he requested. Yes, he requested a 3-year discharge because he wanted to check if there were any motives in the period before he started the diet that led to Sarah limiting his intimacy to 4 times a year plus rewards for achieving goals. September 2008 had 96 calls to 19 different numbers. He discovered that using the format provided to him by the company, he could sort the data in different ways. Therefore, he created a list by numbers showing the number, date, time, and duration of the call. Once he figured out the system, it took him about an hour and a half to create a list of calls made from their home phone over the past 2 years. He was just about to start the same process with Sarah's cell phone data when he heard the office doorknob shaking. The door was locked, so no one could enter. Mark kept everything he did and hid all evidence of his actions. He logged out and opened the door, where he saw the saddest sight imaginable. Sarah was standing there, in a seriously rumpled state, with tousled hair, red eyes and nose from crying and sniffing. She tilted her head from time to time and reluctantly raised her eyes and looked into Mark's eyes. She expressed deep remorse to Mark, acknowledging the pain and anger she had caused. Sarah became aware of her own selfish and cruel actions, admitting that she had overstepped her bounds by interfering with his diet progress. She sincerely apologized, asking for forgiveness, and acknowledging that the decision to continue the diet should have been solely his. Despite feeling overwhelmed by the situation, she begged Mark to forgive her. Mark conveyed his forgiveness to Sarah, stressing that it was given only on the basis of the information available to him at the moment. He expressed his love for her and reminded her of the sacrifices he had made during his 2-year struggle with his weight, including giving up intimacy, everything he had done for her. However, he admitted that he had reached his boiling point and could no longer continue. Mark discussed the current situation, describing her as the elephant in the room who needs to find a solution. He stressed the importance of knowing exactly whether she was cheating on him or not, as the uncertainty drove him crazy. Mark outlined the conditions for their relationship in the future, saying that if she had not cheated in the past and did not plan to change in the future, then they could be fine. However, he made it clear that he needed guarantees. On that fateful day, Sarah's hasty comment and threatening words had left Mark in utter disbelief. He couldn't understand how she could be so indifferent to his feelings and the damage it had caused to their trust. Holding her accountable for the mess she had created, Mark emphasized the need for her to face the consequences until he could regain confidence in their relationship. Sarah had hoped that Mark would simply forgive and forget, but that was not to be. Resigned to her fate, she nodded slowly, expressing agreement, and retreated back to the bedroom, closing the door behind her. Tears streaked her face as she lay on the bed, not sobbing but overwhelmed by the weight of her actions. Meanwhile, Mark decided to distract himself from the heartbreak by visiting a nearby place called Grisham's. It was a spot they had frequented for drinks and excellent food. In the past 2 years, Mark had restrained himself from indulging in more than 2 beers in a week, let alone a bacon cheeseburger. But tonight, he would give in to temptation, indulging in what he truly desired, despite the pain in his heart. Returning home, Mark sought solace in his office, immersing himself in the task of reviewing the call log from Sarah's cell phone. With his familiarity of the process, he swiftly completed the list in half the usual time. As he scrutinized the records, Mark discovered a total of 3,482 calls made over the course of 2 years, originating from 45 different telephone numbers. Curiosity piqued, Mark decided to sort the calls by telephone number, leading to some surprising revelations. His cell phone had received nearly 300 calls, while there were approximately 200 calls each to his and Sarah's parents' numbers. Furthermore, there were numerous calls to Sarah's sisters and his brother John. Some calls were to familiar friends, while others were to unknown numbers. Although these statistics did not greatly concern Mark, he made note of them before focusing on the 2 mysterious numbers. Driven by his investigative nature, Mark delved deeper into his research, sorting the calls by day and time specifically for these 2 unknown numbers. The results were chilling and immediately ignited suspicion and anger within him. Every Wednesday at 11 a.m., When Mark attended a staff meeting, he received a call on his cell phone at precisely 10:55 a.m. Even though some weeks were exempt due to Mark's vacations, the pattern remained intact. At 11:05 a.m., every Wednesday, a call was made to the first unidentified number. Being overwhelmed by these revelations, Mark couldn't shake off the feeling that it was too much of a coincidence. He knew deep down that what he was about to discover would bring him no joy. Undeterred, he turned his attention to the second unknown number and quickly discerned a consistent trend. These calls were consistently made on Fridays, coinciding with Mark's routine of playing golf with his brother and friends, followed by drinks at the clubhouse before going home. Infuriatingly, Sarah would always call Mark just before he teed off, expressing her love and anticipation for his return. It became clear to him now, although he lacked concrete evidence or knowledge of the person she was involved with. The unsettling part was pondering how long this betrayal had been going on. Did it begin only after Sarah had cut him off emotionally, or had it been ongoing, hidden from his sight? Determined to uncover the truth, Mark extended his investigation for another year. As he meticulously gathered evidence, he unearthed that the same calls had occurred once a month in the 3 months leading up to their emotional disconnection. The weight of the revelation sat heavily on Mark's shoulders as he stared at the collected information. His heartbreak now mingled with a tinge of anger and a growing need to confront the truth head-on. No matter what Sarah was doing, she was doing it 3 months ago, but not that often. All he had to do was figure out who it was and decide what to do about it. Mark thought it would be easy to find out who it was. He did a reverse search on the first number and found that it was a mobile phone number that was not listed. Then he did a reverse search on the second number and found out that it belonged to Tony Batali. Of course, Mark knew exactly who Tony Batali was. He was his gym coach. Sarah originally found it for Mark. So Sarah called Tony on Fridays when Mark was playing golf at the gym. Sarah had originally found it for Mark. So Sarah called Tony on Fridays when Mark was playing golf, Mark thought. He recorded the address in his call table and decided to leave for a while. Back at Grisham's, Mark had a couple more beers. When everything calmed down after the peak load, he turned to the rather attractive barmaid Brenda in search of help. He briefly explained the situation and asked Brenda to find out if the first number belonged to Tony. He dialed the number and asked Brenda to ask Tony, and if it was him, then mention that the woman had given her this number as a potential coach. If it's Tony, she should let him know that if he has seats available, she'll drop by the gym one of these days. Brenda picked up the phone and asked the person on the other end of the line if it was Tony. She explained that she is Jennifer, a woman she doesn't know, and who got the name Tony from someone at her beauty salon. This suggestion was made during a conversation about striving to be in the best shape. Jennifer provided some personal information, mentioning her age, 24 years old, height, 5'56", 5 feet 5 inches, and current weight, about 130 pounds. Even though she felt a little examined on the phone, she admitted that she could improve her fitness and happiness by reaching a weight of about 115 pounds. After thanking her for the compliment, Jennifer found out about Tony's availability. After learning that a seat had recently been vacated due to the departure of a client, she expressed her interest. Jennifer announced her intention to visit Tony in a few days to discuss the necessary steps to achieve her fitness goals. She thanked Tony and ended the conversation, looking forward to seeing him soon. Mark was sitting there in amazement at what Brenda had just done. She confirmed that it was Tony from the gym and discovered that he did have relationships with women who used his coaching services. She also clarified that the space was vacated due to the departure of the client. Mark thought it was me who left. To hell with it. Sarah had already called Tony and told him what had happened and warned him to be extremely careful. It's funny, but sitting there, feeling lower than dirt, Mark saw the humor in what Brenda said. He didn't know or care how much she actually weighed. She was hot for who she is. She didn't need to lose weight anywhere. Mark smiled at her and told her that she was very funny, and that he thought she was great for who she was, so she better stay away from Tony. He said it was impossible to find a more perfect body for him than for her, Brenda. Brenda responded to Mark's compliment with a beautiful smile, expressing gratitude and addressing him as a kind sir. She acknowledged Mark's attractiveness, describing him as handsome, and expressed confusion about why his wife was seeking solace elsewhere. Mark, smiling at each other, accepted Brenda's words. Mark admitted that 2 years ago he might not have been considered handsome, but firmly stated that this did not justify his wife's act. He thanked Brenda for her help, both in gathering information about Tony and in raising his lost composure. Mark expressed his gratitude and mentioned that it was time for him to go home. He thanked Brenda once again for her support and understanding. Mark went home, and as it got late, he just went to bed. Climbing into bed, he looked at Sarah and felt a sense of loss and disappointment. He thought he had never been so shameful in his life, but he was sure that until it was over, he would feel even worse. Sarah woke up a little when he got into bed and said, "I love you, Mark." Mark just grunted in response and turned away from her, trying to fall asleep. Of course, he couldn't fall asleep right away and just lay there thinking for a long time. He was sure he had heard a few sobs from Sarah, but clearly she had calmed down. In the morning, Mark woke up to find Sarah clinging to him, her body pressed against his back. Sensing his arousal, she put her arm around him, expressing regret for her previous words and asking for intimacy. Mark, aware of his vulnerability, succumbed to temptation, citing the need to move in the morning and adhere to established boundaries. Mark reminded Sarah of the previously agreed limit, stressing that such attempts should not be repeated. He left the bed, took a shower, and went to work. Sarah, left alone, muttered to herself that she deserved the consequences of her words and the accompanying emotional pain. When he got to work, Mark confessed to his boss about the problems at home, briefly explaining the situation and receiving support. The boss advised him to take the necessary time to sort out his suspicions. The supervisor also provided him with the name of a reliable surveillance electronics supplier. Expressing gratitude, Mark informed his boss that he would take the weekend off from Wednesday to Friday, planning to investigate his suspicions. The boss, understanding Mark's intentions, wished him luck with a sigh. Mark went to the electronics supplier's location and found out that his boss had called ahead and acted as an assistant to provide him with all the necessary support. The visual proof seemed difficult to him, but he believed that the recording would be feasible. He purchased 3 advanced spy devices, with a battery capable of transmitting several hours of activity to a receiver within several city blocks while the operator downloads data. When Mark returned home, a special dinner was waiting for him on the table with his favorite lasagna, with garlic bread and sweet green peas. He thanked Sarah for the wonderful food and excused himself to go watch TV. Sarah cleaned the kitchen and joined him in the TV room, being careful not to get too close before going to bed. She headed to her bedroom, giving Mark the opportunity to install one of the devices on their home phone, ensuring a complete recording of every conversation on that phone. Both sides of the conversation will be heard. Although he was nervous about spying on Sarah's cell phone, he decided to continue without much fear. It only took him a few minutes, and he was done. Now he had a source of information from both phones. The difficulty Mark faced was placing a spy device on Tony's phone. Despite the fact that Mark had already installed devices on Sarah's phones, he thought it was possible that she could use another phone, such as a pager, to communicate with Tony. To cover all the possibilities, Mark decided to try installing a spy device on Tony's phone. Remembering that Tony worked closely with the pumped-up blonde on Wednesday mornings, Mark suspected their contacts and felt the need to gather more information. He planned to take the opportunity when Tony was busy with the blonde to install the device discreetly. Mark imagined that Tony would be so engrossed in the blonde that he would not notice his actions. He went to the gym and saw Tony's phone lying on a towel about 10 feet away from him. Getting a phone was risky, but he thought, what do I have to lose? He crept up, put his phone in his pocket, left the gym, and went into the men's room. There he easily inserted the device into Tony's phone. It was difficult to return the phone to the towel. When he returned to the gym, he saw Tony finishing a workout with a blonde. He knew he couldn't get to the towel and come back unnoticed. Damn it, he thought. How do I do this? After a few seconds, he decided to try sliding the phone across the floor to the towel, hoping to get close enough that Tony wouldn't suspect anything suspicious. It was associated with certain risks, but he still started rolling the phone. Despite the fact that he made some noises, Tony, absorbed in the blonde, remained innocent of anything. Fortunately, he rolled it hard enough for the phone to reach the towel, hitting it and sliding under it. It was perfect. Mark believed that Tony had no more reason to be suspicious, so he quickly left the gym. At exactly 10:55 a.m., his cell phone rang. It was Sarah. She said she wanted to chat before his meeting. Of course, Mark never revealed that he took time off from work for the rest of the week, let alone that he was missing an appointment. After about 10 minutes, Mark started tracking the devices using a receiver from his car. Tony's phone rang and Mark answered quickly. Tony greeted Sarah and asked if she would like to meet at his house as usual. Sarah expressed caution, stating that Mark is highly suspicious and they may be forced to temporarily stop meetings to avoid trouble. Tony grumbled, unwilling to give up his dates. Mark sighed at Sarah's reply. While acknowledging the risk, she admitted that the first time she was with Tony, she knew she would do anything to be with him. She initially stopped discussing Mark to enjoy her time with Tony more. Although she loved him, she couldn't take any chances now. She offered to resume weekly meetings in a few weeks, but for now, Tony would have to settle for one of his other girlfriends. Sarah was not jealous of Tony's relationships with others and suggested considering meetings on Fridays when Mark plays golf. She needed time to think about it, and she promised to let Tony know if it worked out. Mark had already suffered enough, and it made him feel sick and angry. He was determined to get revenge, having endured Tony's advances even before he started the diet. She had used the diet as an excuse to enhance her encounters with Tony. For the past 2.5 years, Sarah had been meeting with Tony every Wednesday and on the monthly golfing Fridays, totaling over 100 encounters. Mark questioned how she could claim to love him while engaging in such behavior and speculated about the possibility of other involvements. Regardless, Tony's involvement alone was enough for Mark to decide on revenge against both of them. Over the next 2 days, he devised plans, established contacts, and ensured favorable conditions for the weekend. Monitoring phone taps, Mark discovered that Sarah had arranged a beautician appointment for Friday morning in a conversation on Thursday. In the conversation with her beautician, Janine, Sarah explained her desire for a new and close-knitty hairstyle to distract Mark from suspicions of infidelity. She mentioned the intention to purchase provocative lingerie to further divert his attention. When asked about Tony, Sarah admitted she might temporarily reduce their encounters but laughed it off, suggesting it wasn't a permanent decision. Despite the laughter, Mark felt devastated by the revelations, yet his anger began to drive him, burying the hurt deep inside. Tony initiated contact on Friday, proposing an immediate rendezvous with Sarah. She expressed her intense desire but conveyed her reluctance due to the risk involved, asking for patience until Mark's suspicions subsided. With each conversation, Mark's heartbreak deepened, struggling to comprehend any love in their relationship. He perceived Sarah's actions as purely selfish, devoid comprehend any love in their relationship. He perceived Sarah's actions as purely selfish, devoid of concern or respect for him. Mark pondered where things had gone wrong, but remained determined to carry out his revenge. On Saturday after lunch, the doorbell rang and Sarah opened it to find Brenda, who introduced herself as a friend of Mark's. Brenda mentioned Mark's approval for her to spend time at the pool. Sarah, taken aback, agreed to show her to the pool. However, Brenda noticed Sarah's lack of a smile, and a subtle smile appeared on her face. Shortly after, Sally and Linda arrived, both informing Sarah that Mark had invited them to use the pool. They shared their connections with Mark, Sally having worked with him for years, and Linda having served them in prisons. Sarah, confronted with the presence of 3 attractive women, began to feel uneasy, contemplating various possibilities. The 3 women settled on chaise lounge chairs, applying sun and lotion to themselves. It didn't take them long to agree to apply sunscreen to each other to ensure they didn't miss any spots. Once they were thoroughly coated, they lay on the loungers and began soaking in the sun. Shortly afterward, they decided an all-over tan would be better. Each woman tied the strings on their bikini tops and dropped them on the towel beside the lounger. Sarah was upset and wanted to ask them to leave, but since Mark had invited them, she had to tread lightly, knowing she was already on thin ice with him. At 3:30 p.m., Brenda approached Sarah and took a seat, revealing that she worked as a bartender at Grisham's. She disclosed that on the night Sarah issued the ultimatum, Mark had stopped by for a few drinks and shared all the details about their situation. Sarah appeared startled, and Brenda expressed her belief that Sarah had made a significant mistake. Continuing, Brenda informed Sarah that Mark was now suspicious and actively investigating their situation. She conveyed Mark's warning to Sarah, stating that if he discovered past or future infidelity, he intended to be carnal with Brenda, Sally, and Linda for each instance of cheating. Sarah, shocked, attempted to respond, but Brenda interjected, adding that Mark also planned to question Sarah, and if she lied, he would be carnal with one of them for each lie. Brenda hinted that they found Mark attractive and were open to being carnal with one of them for each lie. Brenda hinted that they found Mark attractive and were open to being carnal with him. Brenda, already aware of Sarah's past infidelity, anticipated Mark's carnal involvement with her. She also anticipated that Sarah, in an attempt to conceal her actions, would likely lie, leading to a busy time for Mark, satisfying the 3 women. Sally joined Brenda and took a seat, sharing that she had known Mark for several years and always found him handsome and sweet. Despite his weight gain, she believed he remained the same sweet guy she had known. Sally admitted to having a crush on him, which had only intensified since he lost the excess weight. She acknowledged the troubles between Sarah and Mark and expressed her willingness to pursue a relationship with Mark, stating that he could have her anytime he wanted. Linda also chimed in, expressing that she had been observing Sarah and Mark for a couple of years. She noticed the love Mark showed for Sarah, and she made it clear that she had her eye on them. Linda's statement suggested her interest in Mark and her observation of their relationship dynamics. Linda acknowledged Mark's kindness and consideration towards Sarah, expressing admiration for their relationship. She mentioned feeling fortunate to witness such a loving connection and admitted to fantasizing about being in Sarah's position. Linda acknowledged Mark's remarkable weight loss of 118 pounds to make Sarah happy and his transformation into a hunk. She conveyed her admiration for him and expressed a desire to have a man like him in her life. At precisely 4 p.m., as planned, Mark walked out onto the pool deck, observing the presence of Sarah and the three women. He greeted Sarah and commented on the women's improved tans. Mark praised Sarah and commented on the women's improved tans. Mark playfully remarked on the women's beautiful bodies, suggesting they might give him a hard time. He encouraged Sarah to join in the playful banter and jokingly asked why she hadn't removed her top. Sarah, upset by the afternoon's events, reluctantly complied. Mark then posed 2 questions to Sarah, emphasizing the need for honest answers. He inquired if at any point during their marriage she had cheated on him. Sarah firmly denied any infidelity. Mark pressed further, specifically mentioning Tony from the gym. Sarah maintained her denial, expressing confusion about where such an idea originated. Mark continued to question Sarah about her involvement with Tony, mentioning their regular Wednesday meetings and Friday afternoons when he played golf. Despite Mark's detailed knowledge of her affair, Sarah, shocked, stuck to her denial, hoping he lacked concrete evidence. Each of the women present, Brenda, Sally, and Linda, sat with satisfied grins, anticipating the unfolding revelation. Mark proceeded to expose the evidence he had gathered, including phone logs from both the landline and Sarah's cell phone. He described the pattern of calls, pointing out the regularity of her contact with Tony. Mark even had Brenda call the number, confirming it belonged to Tony. Although Mark didn't possess pictures of Sarah and Tony together, it expressed his conviction that the weekly calls were not innocent. In shock, Sarah realized the extent of Mark's knowledge, understanding that their relationship was about to face significant challenges. As she attempted to respond, Mark intervened, stating that there was little to be said and nothing that could convince him of her innocence. Despite his deep love for her, Mark admitted that his current emotions, hurt, disgust, and anger, outweighed his love. Mark introduced the 3 women, Sally, Linda, and Brenda, explaining their connections to him. He described Sally as a longtime work associate, acknowledging her beauty and sweetness. Mark disclosed that he was aware of Sally's crush on him, but he never acted on it out of respect for his marriage to Sarah. Sally smiled, recognizing their genuine friendship. Linda's acquaintance with Mark began during their visits to Grisham's when she served them. Mark revealed Linda's fantasy of being Mark began during their visits to Grisham's when she served them. Mark revealed Linda's fantasy of being with him, emphasizing her admiration for him. He complimented Linda's physical attributes, particularly praising her chest. Mark expressed his intention to indulge in the experience with Linda. Brenda, the newest acquaintance, was introduced as a seasoned bartender who showed empathy and compassion during a conversation about Mark's distress at Grisham's. Mark highlighted Brenda's assistance in obtaining information and forming a connection with her. As Mark spoke, Sarah teetered on the edge of a breakdown, visibly emotional. Tears flowed and her breathing became erratic. Despite her desire to convey something to Mark, she remained silent. Mark, acknowledging the interest expressed by the 3 women, revealed his anticipation of enjoying carnal encounters with them, exploring sensuality in every aspect. However, he reiterated his commitment to not be unfaithful in his marriage and expressed the need to end the marriage with Sarah to pursue these relationships. Mark conveyed his reluctance to violate his pledge and asserted that terminating the marriage was the only solution. Brenda produced divorce papers from her bag and informed Sarah, a bartender by night and a process server by day, that she was being served. Sarah, overwhelmed with emotions, broke into tears at the delivery. In an attempt to plead with Mark, she apologized profusely and expressed her love, pleading with him to reconsider. Mark responded, expressing doubt about Sarah's love, citing her actions over the past 2 years as evidence. He emphasized that the issue went beyond a couple of instances, believing it occurred over 100 times. The court hearing was set for next Friday, and after the legal separation, Mark planned to commence relationships with the three women. He suggested that indulging in pleasures with them might help him find forgiveness for Sarah's affair with Tony and understand the satisfaction it brought her. Mark expressed the hope that a lasting connection with the new relationships could provide the love and support he had believed he had with Sarah. Mark informed the three women that it was time for them to leave, assuring them that he would be in touch individually. He then went into the house to gather a few belongings, preparing for a stay at a hotel until Friday, when either he or Sarah would officially move out. Unable to form coherent thoughts, Sarah remained seated by the pool, now crying softly. Mark emerged through the patio doors, placed his suitcases down, and approached her. Sarah wasn't sure what more he had to say, but it quickly became evident. Mark reminded her of the consequences he had forewarned for her lover. As it turned out, when she supposedly canceled on Tony the previous day, he pursued a relationship with the well-endowed blonde coworker he warmed up with every Wednesday morning from 9:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m., his prelude before their rendezvous. It seems Brenda, Sally, and Linda will have a similar effect on Mark, hoping it transforms him into a lovemaking dynamo for them. By the way, the blonde was Gina Margarella, Gino Margarella's wife. Gino took offense to Tony's involvement with his wife, and he, along with a couple of his associates, subjected Tony to a severe beating. Tony's face is now a mess, with a few remaining teeth and some broken ribs. Gino even allowed Mark the privilege of delivering a significant blow to Tony's groin. The outcome? It's doubtful Tony will produce any more hot seed, and there's skepticism about his ability to engage in lovemaking activities again. Mark, of course, will deny any involvement in Tony's fate. Moreover, Friday, being his golf day, conveniently provides Mark with an alibi through his brother and friends. Wishing Sarah a great life, Mark informed her they would meet in court the following Friday. That day, Sarah was left alone in tears. Within the next 2 hours, she packed her bags and headed to her mother's place. The divorce process took 7 months, leaving Sarah devastated and sinking into deep depression. Contrary to what he claimed about the other ladies, Mark had no intention of following through. Instead, he found solace in 2 golden retrievers and ultimately discovered unconditional true love.